Hi guys, and welcome to the Game Design Book Club. I'm Bjorn, and Tasty couldn't be with us today, but we'll still go on and look at chapter. Actually, it says here, chapter 12, and I think I marked this wrong. It's chapter 12 and 13, not 14. Let's correct that. There we go. Sup Spectrum, welcome. So today we're going to talk. So we're going through The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell, a book of lenses, an awesome book. If you're looking into getting deeper insight into game design, I highly recommend this book. Sup Acorn Ditch, welcome. It's a great book to kind of get more in-depth information about how to create experiences. There's definitely like books that cover more basics, and this is more like where you've maybe made a couple of games and you want to know how to make something with a deeper experience. So today we're going to talk about game mechanics must be in balance. So we're going to talk about in-game balance. And actually, usually I take notes, right? You've seen these before, right? And they've been usually the parts I highlight that are important to discuss. But this time, every one of these is a lens. So this is the amount of lens in just these two chapters. And the first chapter, the balance, it has a lot of lens, like every other page. Meaning, we're probably going to have to kind of cover the lenses, and then I'll try to cover everything that's in between too, but maybe in shorter, briefer form, or we will be here tomorrow still. If you have any questions in chat, please submit them. It might be that Tasty will join us in chat later on, and he might have additional insight. But I'm just gonna delve in. So let's get started. So last chapter was about game mechanics, and this is gonna be about balance. So the first lens of balance is the lens of fairness. It's in the second edition. It's lens number 37. And it goes as follows. To use this lens of fairness, think carefully about the game from each player's point of view. Take into account each player's skill level. Find a way to give each player a chance of winning that each will consider to be fair. Ask yourself these questions. Should my game be symmetrical? Why? Should my game be asymmetrical? Why? Which is more important, that my game is reliable measure of who has the most skill, or that it provide an interesting challenge to all players? If I want players of different skill levels to play together, what means will I use to make the game interesting and challenging for everyone? So the two things I would like to cover about the first lens is symmetrical games and asymmetrical games. So symmetrical games is in many ways much easier to balance. So symmetrical, what he means with that is that, for example, if you play football, it's quite symmetrical. You have the same number of players, the same number of goals, you share the football. There's even resources. The only thing that maybe is a bit asymmetrical is the ball, like the starting, right? When, well, it depends again, American football or not. But in both, it's equally true. Like who gets to start, that's the biggest. And that might be by a flip of a coin or something. And that's asymmetrical then when you are uneven. So for example, a game where you, for example, have to choose classes, that would be asymmetrical. Like if I play a warrior, someone else plays a druid. Those are going to have totally different skill sets, but you still should have them in balance. So they have totally different kind of, balance in that way. So symmetrical, and that goes, and you can take the symmetrical and asymmetrical when you're balancing into even like the map. So for example, if you look at StarCraft, looking at the maps, they're always symmetrical. You have even amount of resources. They're kind of, if you would rotate it from the point of view of the player, or where you starting point, it's always symmetrical or repeating, so you don't have any unfair advantage. That said, again, like in the example of like a role-playing game, there's a lot of cases where you don't want symmetrical. Like if you make something fully symmetrical, like let's say you have a game and you have weapons, all the weapons would be symmetrical, would mean that there's no point. Like what's the difference between an Uzi and a shotgun if they would be totally the same, like same firing rate, same damage. It's a bit silly when you think about it, but that's actually what we actually will cover later on. Actually, is a bit in the same similar topic. So he continues in the lens still. There's a small paragraph he adds to it, which says, fairness can be a slippery subject. There are some cases where one side has an advantage over the other, and the game still seems fair. Sometimes this is so that the players of an unequal skill can play together. But there can be other reasons. In the game Alien vs. Predator, for example, it is generally recognized that in multiplayer mode, Predators have a significant advantage over aliens. Players do not consider it to be unfair, however, because it is keeping the Alien vs. Predator story world. And they accept that if they play as an alien, they will be at a disadvantage and will need to compensate for that with extra skill. It is a badge of pride among players to be able to win a game when playing as an alien. So this is lens number 37. And if you have the first edition, it might be a different lens. We don't have Tasty here. He would probably tell us which one it is, but at least in the second edition. So and next year there's going to come out a third edition, which even adds upon this book. Thus far, it's only been like 2 chapters of difference, and we're about halfway through the book right now. So that's basically the lens of fairness. The fairness for me personally, if I kind of look at it from my own perspective, it's kind of a hard thing. Like, a lot of players measure things by, is it fair or not? And in many ways, fairness has nothing to do with balance. Fairness is kind of how, I see it a lot of the time, like how people subjectively see a game. Like, it could still be in imbalance but seem fair, or vice versa. It does have to do with balance though, but kind of in a way how you need to think about it. He also shows some examples how you could balance with, for example, trying to balance with, we can see here, like using Excel sheets where he has this is the first scenario, you have 3 different planes. It has speed, maneuverability, and firepower. And then you have like medium, like the Piranha play has medium speed, medium maneuverability, and medium firepower. And then if you then numerate them, like low would be 1 point, medium would be 2, and high firepower would be 3, then he totals them up, and then you get a different total here. And then you can change and until you get even totals, right? The thing is, this is all linear. It also says that speed would be as important as maneuverability, as in firepower, and that's the thing. He even starts with here, which he repeats throughout this chapter, is that when balancing something, first, of course, try to get it mathematically, or try to come up with some kind of model to get it to what you think is balanced. But in the end, it's kind of like, then you give it to players, they will find a loophole, they'll find a hole in your thinking, and then, they'll find a dominant strategy, basically. So something that is so dominant, you will always win if you use this strategy. And then you have to adjust the model. And then you adjust the model, and then so on and so forth. There was a really good speech by the guys who made Battle Royale, I think, was it? I actually tweeted it out. So basically which I'm surprised, he doesn't, during this whole chapter, he talks about testing with players, but he doesn't talk a lot about analytics. I think analytics is really good, especially if you're doing multiplayer. Not for fairness, but tracking things. So remembering to, because the thing is, there's different things about how players experience it, which would be the fairness factor, to where you actually look at statistics. So if it's a card game and you're playing a card, some card you might think is unfair, but then when you look at the stats, what is the win ratio of the card? It might not be that much above. It's just that the card is used so much more, so it's more likely that if someone wins, it's gonna be with this card. So there's a lot of different things. Oh, Hardly Difficult with the host. Welcome, Hardlians. We are going through The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell, and we're discussing game balance, something probably you guys are familiar with. Hi, Hardly. How was your stream, dude? Welcome, welcome. we just went through our first lens, which was the lens of fairness, which already from the name, it is kind of what is fair. It's very subjective, but it's important to look at from a player's perspective too. If you guys are not following Hardly Difficult, go click his name, go drop him a follow. He's an awesome streamer. Where's Tastygraph? I don't trust you alone, Bjorn. Zeok! Tasty is he's visiting Arash in the dungeon. No, Tasty couldn't be here today. He might jump into the chat though at some point. Yes, now you're only hearing the Bjorn aspect of this. But Tasty will be back next week. Next week we'll actually, the Game Design Book Club will be on a Saturday. Because I have things on Sunday. We can't make it, can't do it on Sunday. So, the next lens, like I said, there's so many lenses, so we just have to skip to the next lens. I'll try to cover everything in between, but I need to keep it short too. So the next lens, so the next thing in balancing a game is the lens of challenge. So this is lens 38 in the book. Also, by the way, if you want to just remember the lenses, there's an app on both the Android and iOS store, the deck of lenses you can download, and you have all the lenses there too. It doesn't have all this text around it, it'll just have this lens. So you can follow along using that, or you can just use those to remind yourself what to take into account, for example, when balancing. So the next lens is the lens of challenge. Challenge is at core of almost all gameplay. You could even say that a game is defined by its goals and its challenges. When examining the challenge in your game, ask yourself these questions. Yeah, it's free. The deck of lenses is totally free. So, ask yourself these questions. What are the challenges in my game? Are they too easy, too hard, or just right? Can my challenges accommodate a wide variety of skill levels? How does the level of challenge increase as the player succeeds? Is there enough variety in the challenges? What is the maximum level of challenge in my game? So, the next part he discusses. So, he goes back. If you followed, I think it was in the last episode even, you saw probably this curve. Or was it the previous one? So, you have this, the flow, right? We discussed the flow. So, challenge rating. Meaning that, you know, not being too high of a challenge rate and not to require too much skill. So it should be, the challenge should go like fluctuate. So it become a bit harder and then it becomes easier because you achieved something and you know, you get a new skill. It gets a bit easier, but then the game ramps up challenge again. And this goes back to balancing. So balancing that whole kind of curve that goes up and to the right. You've probably seen that in some other places. It's a very common curve. So, and he goes through several different methods. I don't know if we have time to cover them all, but I can at least read them out loud. So increase difficulty with each success. So every time you succeed, for example, pass a level, next level is going to be harder. So that's one way to do it. Let players get through easy parts fast. So if you're more skilled, you can make it so that, you know, you can get through things faster if you're more skilled. So if you already know the genre or you already know how to play, you don't have to play at the speed of somebody who just started and getting to know the game. So you kind of don't allow to skip, but basically because of your skill, like don't make it so that, you know, if like a set time to get through, so you're just bored, like 60 minutes of boredom to, you know, go through the thing. So just allow and think about the players who already know the genre, except if you're totally new and you don't, the totally new genre, I mean, for game that you expect nobody to be skilled. But that's very rare. I don't know if there's that many people who invent new genres these days. Create layers of challenge. So again, what he means with that is like, you know, the rating. After you've passed the levels, you know, you get A, B, C, D, E, F rating, you know, as F being fail or something like that. And then you could say you have to get a C rating to get past this level. So that gives like newer players something to achieve. And then the people who are more skilled, you know, they might try to get an A plus or something like complete achievement, like completionist basically. So that way you also, again, taking into account, like you basically raise the level of difficulty by somebody trying to be a tryhard. It's kind of mean to say it that way, but like, you know, if you're better, you can then have a different scale of what you can achieve. Whereas the people who are just getting in, they might be happy with just getting a C and getting a pass. Playtest with variety of players. So remember to playtest not only with people who, like, a lot of, like, even I do this mistake where I test with the same people over and over, meaning that every time they test, they actually become more skilled. So you should always introduce new players into your tests. Make sure that it's not just, because what happens if you just test with players who already know the game, the game's going to become harder because they're not going to catch on to like the beginning stuff, you know. Only a beginner would know that, oh, is this hard to get started with. Hey, Alexi Casey, welcome to the company Game Devs, and cheers for the follow. Turbo Mouth. Hopefully I'm not talking too fast or too slowly. I try to keep an even pace. Give the losers a break. So again, he uses even Mario Kart here as an example. So, you know, if you're leading the race, you're more likely to get hit by the blue shell and stuff like that, or not likely, like you're scared of that. So, having these kind of things, think about these kind of things, kind of how is a beginner in the genre going to be met with this game? Or you can also make a game that's only for hardcore gamers, like somebody like Dark Souls, for example, is just made for hard. Like it does have a slight beginner's tutorial, but then after that it becomes easier, right? Not easier, like it becomes really hard. I mean, meaning that it caters for a certain audience, but then do it knowingly and know that you're alienating some people. It's fast enough for my ears. Okay, good. So, that was the Lens of Challenge. It's a hard one. It's kind of, there's so many things. And there's also stuff that the book just can't, like in the book format, you can't cover. Like balance is always something it's always an iterative thing. So for example, even what he says here is like, remember that leave enough time to balance. Like one of the industry standards is to leave at least 6 months before release to just balancing. And he argues that he recommends 50% because a bigger game is going to take more time to balance because it usually probably has more mechanics, not always. Depends on what you mean with big. So I think that's good advice. So if you expect, like once you have first playable or like something playable, expect at least much time to balance everything out when you have all the key features in. Then, so we only covered 2 lenses. It's already been 20 minutes. Crap, I need to speed up. As we have this many lenses left. So if I'm going fast, it's because balancing, he has a lot to say. So the next one is the Lens 39, the lens of meaningful choices. It's one of my, pet peeves in games. When we make meaningful choices, it lets us feel like things we do matter. To use this lens, ask yourself these questions. What choices am I asking the player to make? Are they meaningful? How? Am I giving the player the right number of choices? Would more make them feel more powerful? Would less make the game clearer? Are there any dominant strategy in this game? So here he starts by, again, explaining dominant strategy. We've used that already several months. So dominant strategy being, hey, sup, Super Jesse, welcome. So dominant strategy meaning like, where you find, well, Jesse's game, we have found a dominant strategy. Oh, Sergeant Dios, welcome to the company Game Devs. It's good to remind me to drink always. Ooh, from Portugal. Nice. I don't know if we have that many people from Portugal. We have some from Brazil, but that's quite far away from Portugal. So again, the lens of meaningful choices, dominant strategy is that you can find a way that every time you will use this, you will quite, like with a high probability win. Monopoly has one actually, why I don't like playing it, because basically there's a dominant strategy in that one. And then if 2 players play it, it's just gonna drag on, like if the 2 people know it, it's gonna drag on for like hours and hours. Also, the Monopoly has other balancing issues, like you know who's gonna win halfway through the game, which kind of takes away the surprise, and you know there's no point in struggling anymore. You could as well end the game there. Anyway, but meaningful choices. So he even has another set of questions. You know, like if your player starts thinking these type of questions, like where should I go, how should I spend my resources, what should I practice and try to perfect, how should I dress my character, should I try to get through a game quickly or carefully, should I focus on offense or defense, like these are meaningful, right? Like, but then it can also become very meaningless. Like if you would have a car game and it would have 10 cars, but they're all just the exact same stats, they all have the same max speed, they're just different cars, that would probably be quite meaningless. Like, you know, why would I choose the Mustang over something else? It's just like, oh, okay, I got this car now. But then again, some like visuals are important. Like in The Sims, you want to have a lot of choice. You want to make people able to decorate their houses the way they want to. Whereas the stats don't really, it's not a stats game. So depending on the type of game, think about, like, is it meaningful? Like one thing I see a lot of the time is people making mobile games, and again, one of my pet peeves is, and then they will add something into the game, like they will add where if you play 5 levels, then you get unlock another, you know, look for your character. The thing is, and it's a single player game, and when you get the character, it's just a visual. It doesn't really change the gameplay in any way, and it kind of doesn't make sense. It's not meaningful at all. Whereas if they made it so that, you know, for example, in some multiplayer games, you get to unlock when you achieve something like get 10 kills in a row, unlock the, you know, great, like crazy cowboy hat, like one shot hat or something, whatever. And then it's meaningful because it has a social aspect, right? I can brag to my friends. Well, when someone sees me in game, they're gonna be, oh, that guy's, you know, dangerous. Or there's other example. We can go on and on and on with probably examples of like when is it meaningful, when isn't it? But always think about that, is like just because one other game has it, remember, why is it meaningful in that game? So when you're copying this kind of avatar change or choices from another game, why is it like if it's a good game, why is it meaningful in it? And then if you copy that mechanic, remember to copy over the meaningfulness too. Otherwise, it won't work. Otherwise, it will just be an aesthetic, and you're just gonna waste time creating something that just gonna suck up time, right, to create. Because, you know, if you're gonna create 500 different hats, but they're not meaningful for the players, then you're just creating a lot of work for yourself. Now, then let's go on forward to the next lens. Sup, Crimson Wings? Welcome. Just joined in? Well, if you just joined in, we're looking at The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. We're at chapter 13, and this chapter has so many lenses, so you will see me skip from lens to lens to lens. So lenses are anyway the kind of core of this book. So let's go on to the next lens. If you don't have the book, there's actually a link below. You can buy it, but it's Amazon, so it's going to take time for you to receive it. Sup, KDO? How are you, dude? Welcome. So the next is one of my favorite. One thing I've actually started to use a lot in my own game, just like since I read this, refreshing the book. So the lens of triangularity? Triangularity? What is that? Oh, nice. Yeah. You can also watch the VODs. They're in their own playlist somewhere up there if you're on Twitch. So, the lens of triangularity. Giving a player the choice to play it safe for a low reward or to take a risk for a big reward is a great way to make your game interesting and exciting. To use the lens of triangularity, ask yourself these questions. Do I have triangularity now? If not, how can I get it? Is my attempt to triangularity balanced? That is, are the rewards commensurate with the risk? Are the rewards commensurate with the risk? That sounds weird. Once you start looking for triangularity in games, you will see it everywhere. A dull, monotonous game can quickly become exciting and rewarding when you add a dash of triangularity. And now, I talked about triangularity for like 2 minutes, and you're still like, what is it? So, again, here's a picture from the book. Let me see if I can get it good enough into the view. Whoop. So basically, this is a triangle. So the player's in the middle, and you have two choices. You can take a low risk, low reward choice, or a high risk, high reward choice. And that forms a triangle. So again, for example, what would be a good example? See if he uses here any good ones. So for example, I think, like, for example, he takes apart Mario Kart. So for example, are you gonna drive with manual or automatic shifting? So manual requires more skill to use, but you can, when used well, you can get a bit of boost. Sup, Blind Eye? Are you gonna use a kart or a bike? You know, a kart has higher base speed, but with the bike, if you do a wheelie, you can go faster. So again, there's a risk you can fall backwards, but you also get more speed. So again, low risk, low reward, high risk, high reward, if you know. So again, it's also, even here, plays into skill, right? So if you're highly skilled, you can probably choose the high risk, high reward more often, and that kind of guarantees that you will win more often. But it requires practice. For example, and then it goes on, grab power-ups, you know, or ignore them. So if you grab power-ups, you're gonna have to go kind of drive to the side to get the power-up. Are you gonna use it or not, or ignore them in Mario Kart? Keep the power-up you've got, or dump it and you take another. So you could dump it and hope to get something better, but that's high risk. Someone else might take it, except if you dump it just before you take it or something. Use the speed boost pads again. So this game is full, like he says here, like the whole Mario Kart is full of these things. Hit the gas early in the game, so when you start, you can press the gas, right? And if you hit the right timing, you get a slight boost. But if you hit the wrong time, it slows you down. So again, high risk, high reward, or low risk, low reward. But it shouldn't be too punishing. Again, it's very important, like, if you do these choices, like, just because someone chooses manual over automatic or automatic over manual, they shouldn't lose the whole game because of it. Like, you should still have a good chance to win the thing. Not in stock. Aw, damn. I'll keep it on a wish list, though, so I can follow with you next time. Yeah, you might find it also cheaper locally. It's not the most... it's actually quite, it's not expensive, but it is like $60 or something, depending a bit where you live and what the shipping is. But I definitely recommend it. It's one of the better books. It covers so many different topics in a good way, and it has a lot of good things. The problem with this book is that it's so thick that most people won't read it through. And that's why we have the book club, so we can go through it together. And if you don't want to read it at all, you can just follow along listening here. So that's the triangularity. So the triangle between the player and then a low risk, low reward, or high risk, high reward. Thick. So thick. I like my books thick. Thick book emote. That would be interesting. Thick. And then we have the next lens again. So again, we're jumping from lens to lens because trust me, this will take 2 hours even when doing this. So now, last one is the lens of triangularity. Think about, can you give a low risk option, low reward option, and high risk, high reward? For example, in my game, which is a falling game, you are actually trying to escape a tower, and you can actually exit the tower. So exiting the tower should be a high risk, high reward, where you can actually maybe skip some parts, but also you could die and lose a life. Or you can go and try to go through the thing, which is low risk, low reward all the time. So it's just basic gameplay. Now, the next lens. So next, the part of balancing. Am I going too fast? Should I take a sip of drink? By the way, guys, if you have any questions or anything like, what did you say? Or if you feel like I didn't explain something well enough, or usually these questions, they come up after you listen to something. You're like, oh. Which book is this? This is The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell, a book of lenses. Highly recommend it. Yep. Exactly. So the next lens. Hey, Majestic Mac, welcome to the company Game Devs. Cheers for the follow. From the books below, it depends. Each of those books below are totally different. So I have a list where I think it's like Level Up is one of them. Theory of Fun, which is a really good book also. There's one that's missing there actually, which I want to add. Anyway, I don't remember what his name is right now. The Art of Game Design, and then there's the Games for Without Frontiers. So Level Up, if you just started making games, I would highly recommend Level Up. Like if you haven't even made your first game, that is probably the book I would recommend. There's one other, again, but it's not on that list. Then after that, if you've made a couple of games and you're like now maybe considering making your first bit bigger game, like not a game jam game or something like that, like more. If you're trying to put it on Steam, then I would recommend The Art of Game Design, this book. So the second book. So Level Up, then this. And then, for example, Theory of Fun is kind of in between these two, I guess. So Level Up is more approachable, more practical, whereas this is more like artistic experience based, how to create an experience and like stuff like that. So it's more, if you don't have any basis, for example, you've not created a game, you might be like, why should I think about that? I don't know when to use this. So this requires a bit of experience before you can really know the value of what this book is talking about. Now instead, Level Up is more like practical. It's like, this is how you do it. This is more, yeah. It is more theory. This has much more theory in it. And then the Games Without Frontiers is very theoretical. It's probably the last book. I hope I put it last in the list too. It's probably the most theoretical. It's like if you are it's a PhD. It's probably, I think it's the world's first doctoral in game design who wrote it. If not the first, one of the first. And he basically is taking it apart really theoretically, everything. And it's like, if you love the scientific text, you should read that one. Or if you wanted to like really become like an expert, then that's a good book. Also, this book, the good thing is that each chapter, it does recommend other books for each topic. So that's the idea. So this is kind of like early, like I would say this is really good for early to late, like not very late. Like if you're already you have a master's degree in game design, you're probably not gonna learn so much new from this. It might be good to refresh it though. Sometimes, like even me, reading through these things is like, oh, I forgot to think about that. So anyway, so the next lens 41, the lens of skill versus chance. To help determine how to balance skill and chance in your game, ask yourself these questions. Are my players here to be judged? Skill, or skill in parentheses, or to take risks? Chance. Skill tends to be more serious than chance. Is my game serious or casual? Are parts of my game tedious? If so, will adding elements of chance enliven them? Do parts of my game feel too random? If so, will replacing elements of chance with elements of skill or strategy make the players feel more in control? This actually comes down to also, and he even discusses it here, is also you need to think about your target audience. So who is playing your game? Is you playing more casual or is he more skill-based hardcore game player? For example, when I was doing one of my, I studied masters. I just studied game design in university and got my master's in it. That's what I was about to say. And one of the courses, we made a board game, which was very much based on chance. But it had some skill, but it was very hard. It was kind of like steering a ship in mid of a storm. And that was the whole idea. It was a pirate game. There was all kinds of currents, and the currents you could use to your benefit, but at the end of where you landed, you might get a random event. And that was still maintained and governed by actually a story that also kind of changed what happened. So there are teachers who loved skill-based games, especially board games. So this was a board game. disliked a lot the chance element of it because he felt he was not in control. And that is something that people who if you expect a very like skill-based game, like our game used hexes, which usually is connected to skill, like Civilization or something like that, then people might not expect it again. So it's very important to remember what type of game are you making, and does the kind of aesthetics and everything support that it's a casual game. Hey, Zenbonzurakurabr? I hope I probably butchered your name. Welcome still to the company Game Devs, and cheers for the follow. Bonza. There's probably if I had the capitals, I would probably know what word starts. Sup, Broken Wind Games? Welcome. Welcome to the Game Design Book Club. Anyway, so again, and this is a hard thing. So, well, like if you have a game and movement, is it you roll a dice and that chooses where you go? Might be very, very like too chance driven. But let's say you do a dice roll and it decides how far you can go. Then again, if you want to go to more skill-based game, you might have a point system. So, for example, instead of rolling a dice, you would say you have 5 actions. And with those actions, you can either, if you move, it takes up 1 action. If you move 2, it takes up 3 actions. Also doing, attacking takes up an action. Maybe buying, or maybe Senbon Zakura was a Bonkai ability in Bleach. I'm a nerd. Oh! Nice. Pseudo Bang Bang? Welcome to the company Game Devs, and cheers for the follow. Is that also a ability in Bleach? Anyway, I actually watched Bleach. I can't remember any of the the abilities there. Hey, Everjuan, thank you for the host, and welcome everybody. We're going through the art of game design. No. How dare he suggest that? If you haven't checked out Everjuan, click his name, drop a follow. We're currently on the lens of skill versus chance, discussing or looking at like, okay, so in one hand you have a skill-based system, and one you have a random or chance-based system, and then being able to choose when to use what. And like I said, it depends on your audience, it depends on the type of game you're making. Even if you're trying to make, like, let me make a casual strategy game, you want to still be careful of not dropping into common pitfalls, meaning like, if a certain audience, like everything looks very serious, like you're making, but then you're just making some aspects that are more casual, it might be that you actually alienate the people who like the strategy game. But if you, for example, make it look very casual, then you already alienate the strategy people early enough that they won't like hate on your game. And then maybe it already welcomes the people who would like to try strategy, but are just scared to do that. So that's a bad example, though. Yeah. Schnaps? Schna? Welcome, P5. Welcome to Company Game Devs. Cheers for the follow. It's an ability in Hitman. It is. So, again, this is another thing to think about. Oh, Ahage. Welcome to the Company Game Devs. Cheers for the follow. I'm getting too much to drink now. I'm already finished my first cup. I need to calm down. Luckily, I'm not drinking. This is vodka, so luckily it's not. It's only 40% vodka, not like 60. Anyway, the skill versus chance. It's again a very important decision. And a lot of the time, it's left up to chance which one the designer chooses. So having this kind of mentality that, okay, who is my player? Okay, how does that affect, should I choose skill versus chance? Again, I think there's a lot of games that, yeah, I don't know. This is an interesting topic, but we can't get stuck too long on it. I don't know if you guys have a good example of skill. Have you found anywhere where you would have liked something to be skill instead of just random, or vice versa, where you think that the skill system was just too much, you just wish they would throw a dice and choose between something? Davimore, welcome to the company Game Devs, and cheers for the follow. For a second there, I thought that entire jar was vodka. Yes, it is. This is vodka, you know. That's what we Finns drink. So, let's go to the next, because again, look how many we have left. We've covered 5 lenses in 40 minutes, and we still have like probably twice that left. So, let's go maybe 15 to 20 left. So, we have quite a few today. So, I'm kind of really fast going through them, because I think at the whole, all these things, if you bunch them together, then you have like a good way to start estimating how should you balance your game. So we're discussing balance today. So the next lens, all of these have to do with how to balance your game. The lens of head and hands. Who wants to guess what that means? That's not what it is. What are you saying, chat? Weird. No, I was kidding. So it says the following. Yogi Berra once said, baseball is 90% mental. The other half is physical. To make sure your game has a more realistic balance of mental and physical elements, use the lens of head and hands. Ask yourself these questions. Head and hands? Sorry. My pronunciation is very bad. Are my players looking for mindless action or an intellectual challenge? Would adding more places that involve puzzle solving in my game make it more interesting? Are there places where the player can relax their brain and just play the game without thinking? Can I give the player a choice? Succeed either by exercising a high level of dexterity or finding a clever strategy that works with a minimum physical skill? If 1 means all physical and 10 means all mental, what number would my game get? The lens works particularly well when used in conjunction with lens 19, the player. So the lens 19 with the player, we scroll back 100 pages here. Let's see if I can find it fast. There was lens 17, Einstein's violin, interesting things. Let's see here. Where are you? Here we go. The lens 19, the player. So if you missed that one, it says, to use this lens, stop thinking about your game and start thinking about your player. Ask yourself this question about people who will play your game. In general, what do they like? What don't they like? Why? What do they expect to see in the game? And if I were in their place, what would I want to see in the game? What would they like or dislike about my game in particular? And I think this also, the lens number 19, really fits into the whole skill versus chance lens too. These are Sennheiser Momentum. Yeah, they are. They're like the on-ear, but I have it off-ear just so that I can hear my voice. So they're fully sealed. They're kind of okay. I kind of think that they're overrated. Like, I would now want to not have a closed headset. They have better sound. So the lens in hand. So again, so what this means is like, think about, is this like, do you want an action type of game? Like, is it an action type, like, are you playing Mario with a lot of jumping puzzles? Or are you playing Braid, which is like time warping and puzzle solving? Actually, that's the thing. Like, I was first, when I played Braid, I thought it would be an action game, and then it was very, like head driven, so puzzle driven, and that actually turned me off in the beginning until I just decided to give it a try. So that's again a very important thing about like the whole how you wrap and package a game is also going to attract a certain type of player, and then you might, if you expect a certain type of experience, you might get disappointed. So again, what to say about this? I think it's kind of clear. This is probably one of the easier lenses to explain. Like, is your game more slow paced? Do you want the player to stop and think? Then put more puzzles in it, and more like puzzles and like mind bogglers, and try to use make them use intellect. Whereas, if you want a more action based game, jumping and fast paced, don't throw puzzles at them. Don't throw things where they have to stop and think or stop all the time, because that's going to remove from the action, right? Then it's not going to be a very interesting game. And remember the wrapping. So if you're going to make a game that's heavily thinking based or head based or like intellectual kind of. Intellectual is maybe not the right word because you don't necessarily have to be intellectual. You don't have to read a lot of books or anything. But like if you want that type of feeling, like Civilization, the action version, probably looks very different from Civilization, the head version. So again, what would be the hands version of Civilization? Try to think. Like there's definitely things that are more action based, like maybe more real time makes it more action versus head, like looking at any real like RTS instead of turn based, and so on and so forth. But you won't have as much deep thinking because you have a limited time to think. So then it becomes in the end, like StarCraft is in the end the action game. It's just in the beginning when you're practicing. Actually, StarCraft is fully, almost fully an action game because it's an RTS and the player who are really up the top, they know the strategies, they know what to do, and they just kind of in the end react, and they just know how to control and do a lot amount of actions. Of course, there is still strategy behind it, but it's not as in, something more slow paced. Then with the next one, the next lens goes into the lens of competition. So the next part of how to balance your game is think about competition. Thank you for the follow, Marley. Jay, welcome to the company. And cheers. So, the lens of competition. So, determining who is most skilled at something is a basic human urge. Games of competition can satisfy that urge. Use this lens to be sure your competitive game makes people want to win. Ask yourself these questions. Does my game give a fair measure of player skill? Do people want to win my game? Why? Is winning the game something people can be proud of? Can novices meaningfully compete at my game? Can experts meaningfully compete at my game? Can experts generally be sure that they will defeat novices? So, again, if you're making a game that's not about, competition, then this lens probably is not as, relevant. And also it goes then. So basically this page, as you can see, these red lines are the lenses. So it instantly goes to two other lenses. Let's read those out too. The most pro, can Björn win at my game? Realio, I will never win your game. I make sure of that. I make sure that I fail miserably at every game I play. That is the fun for me. It's like, how hard can I fail? So he doesn't go that deeply in because I think it's kind of clear. So again, if your game is about competition, think about, how can you reward a player? What is the goal of the player? Which is the lens of goals, which we already had. But I think the most important thing is like, can experts generally be sure to defeat novices? And also, can novices meaningfully compete at my game? I think a lot of games that go into the competitive, some games do a good job at taking care of the people who just started. So it's not just a game for, MLG, Major League players or whatever you want to call them, like people who already played for years and years and professionals. So definitely remember again, when you test, remember to include beginners in your test and experts so you get the wide range. Don't always test with the same people because even if they are beginners at the game, they will learn. So they will once they test your game, they will never again be true beginners. The next lens is the lens of cooperation. So if your game has cooperation in it, think about these things. Collaborating and succeeding as a team is a special pleasure that can create lasting social bonds. Use this lens to study the cooperative aspects of your game. Ask these questions. Cooperation requires communication. Do my players have enough opportunity to communicate? How would communication be enhanced? Are my players friends already? Are they strangers? If they're strangers, can I help them break the ice? Is there synergy? Meaning 2 plus 2 equals 5. So you have synergy. Or antergy, meaning 2 plus 2 equals 3, which is less than the sum again. When players work together, why? Do all players have the same role or do they have special jobs? Cooperation is generally enhanced when there's no way an individual can do a task alone. Does my game have tasks like that? Tasks that force communication inspire cooperation. do any of my task force communication. So this is again very specific to a certain type of game. So if your game is about cooperation, which I find that more board games do, more board games are cooperative, or at least either has the possibility for alliances. There's digital games like Journey does a great job. Like if you want to do this type of game, I would definitely look into Journey. You could even say Dark Souls has a cooperative element with leaving the notes, so you kind of cooperatively try to solve how to get through things, and that's true communication again. What else would there be? Civilization, you can forge alliances just to break them later on, but and then that might give you more map visibility and stuff like that. So think about the synergy, antergy. So what do I gain if it's not a fully cooperative game? Like you can break the thing. Think about what kind of synergy, what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks with cooperating. So in alliances, you never can trust the people, but and you might gain a lot of knowledge, and actually also defeat a bigger foe. But once you've defeated that bigger foe, you will probably dissolve the alliance and then compete against each other to see who is the best between you two. And that's why it's always, in the end, you're not truly cooperating. And I think the cool thing about this lens is that it really highlights that communication is part of this. If your game doesn't have excellent ways of communicating, your cooperation will probably fail. Meaning that, again, looking at like corporate like Journey, you don't have to have like voice chat or anything. It's not about the type of code, it's just that it enables that way. And it might become core of the gameplay. Like in Journey, I think communicating with the other player is core. And they're strangers. So, again, look at that game, see how do they break the ice. And then, again, the next lens goes more deeply even into the whole kind of civilization alliance thing, which is lens 45, lens of competition versus cooperation. It's kind of weird that he made that a lens. But anyway, some of these don't feel like lenses. They just feel like they could be just chapters in here. Balancing competition and cooperation can be done in many interesting ways. Use this lens to decide whether they are balanced properly in your game. Ask yourself these questions. If 1 is competition, 10 is cooperation, what number should the game get? So again, how cooperative is it? Like for example, Dark Souls, you could also cooperate to take down bosses and things in Dark Souls 2. I haven't played it, so I can't explain how that works. There's probably people in the chat who know more. But again, where would that lie? Would that be very cooperative or very little? Like 1 would be fully competitive, like there's no cooperation at all, and 10, full cooperation, you can't even compete. So where do you lie in that spectrum? Which also, because you decide that in the beginning before you even design your game, it helps you build strong mechanics that lead to that value. So you can always question, like I wanted something where you can, it's like Civ, it's kind of 50-50, right? I want something that's very 50-50. I want people to turn on each other, but I also want them to cooperate. How do I achieve that? Or if you want it to be more lenient, more cooperative, then think about like maybe having people flip on each other is not the best thing. So think about that. But what is then what makes it not fully a cooperative game? Like, is it just that people ignore each other? So these are good questions to ask yourself. Can I give players a choice whether to play cooperatively or competitively? Does my audience prefer competition, cooperation, or a mix? Is team competition something that makes sense for my game? Is my game more fun with team competition or solo competition? So for example, a 7 or 8 in like cooperation might be a team-based game. It might be also that you can win the game also cooperatively, but you can also win it competitively. These are hard words to say fast. I feel like we're going through these too fast almost. There's so much cool knowledge here. And it's kind of hard to bring forward like how these all kind of, they all kind of affect, again, your balance. So, for example, a competitive game, like let's go back a couple of steps, right? So the first lens we read was the lens of fairness. In the lens of fairness, we discussed symmetry versus asymmetry. So symmetry meaning you have the equal resources, you have the equal like the map looks the same, like in StarCraft or in a football, American and soccer, they're mirrors of each other. You have equal amount of players. Like let's say you would suddenly have one that has, you have twice the strong player in one team, but you have half the number of players in another team. It would be asymmetrical, meaning not even, but it could still be balanced and fair. So now looking at that, like probably if you're making a competitive game, that is more important to think about than if you're making a cooperative game. Because a cooperative game, you can probably get away with worse balance. Like even if one character is a bit overpowered versus another or more powerful, but if you're playing all towards the same goal, it's not as crucial. But if you're playing competitively, especially alone, if one race or something is dominant, then it's going to be much more important to keep these in balance. And that's something he actually doesn't discuss that long, I think, like too much in this book, that those choices, so everything, every lens, everything you go through in this chapter is going to impact each other. So choosing a competitive game probably leads you to more of a symmetrical game. So thinking about giving exactly the even chances to each player. A less competitive game probably, you can be more lenient and more asymmetrical. Like an RPG, a lot of the time, if you play an RPG, you play cooperative. It's a cooperative game. Like you're playing against monsters or something, which means that you can have a bit more, like it's easier to design versus if you would play against each other. I think World of Warcraft, even with their battlegrounds or whatever they were called, kind of showed that straight from the the PvP was never big in that game except in those arenas. So the arena gameplay, they basically have to rebalance things because it wasn't designed to be competitive. Now, going forward, so that was all about competitiveness and cooperation. Now, let's take a look at the next lens. There's so much knowledge here, which I wish we could go through, but we don't want a 6-hour stream. Or do we? PvP, PvE, and PvP and PvE. Yeah, they have those modes, but even with the PvP servers, which I played, you just get ganked. I mean, the PvP wasn't really... It was kind of just that you could get killed. I mean, there was nothing in... Like, I think you could take over other people's zones or something. I can't remember. I only played it in the first, until the first expansion pack or something. So it definitely iterated and changed. But following that, if you were avid World of Warcraft, and that's where I would wish Tasty was here today, because he could speak in depth about that. I think that who doesn't want a 6-hour stream? I do. Well, we're gonna have also more. We're gonna do some drawing today, so that would make it a total of 12 hours. I'll be in the end like. Yeah. So I think World of Warcraft, looking at that and how they made it suddenly a bit more competitive through the arenas, from more cooperative from the instances and stuff like that, from raiding, well, not raiding, that's a totally different thing, but from the dungeons, playing like, I don't remember what they were called, dungeons? Instances? I don't know, anyway, it was instance based at least, but anyway, so that where you play a certain against a boss or go through a maze, which was more cooperative. You would be as a team against the system. So, which meant they had to rebalance it. So the next lens is the lens of reward. Everyone likes to be told they're doing a good job. Ask these questions to determine if your game is giving out the right rewards in the right amounts at the right times. What rewards is my game giving out now? Can it give out others as well? Are players excited when they get rewards in my game, or do they get bored by them? Why? Getting a reward you don't understand is like getting no reward at all. Do my players understand rewards they are getting? Are the rewards my game gives out too regularly? Can they be given out in a more variable way? How are my rewards related to one another? Is there a way they could be better connected? How are my rewards building? Too fast, too slow, or just right? Balancing rewards is different for every game. Not only does a designer have to worry about giving out the right ones, but he have to worry, or she have to worry about giving them out at the right times in the right amounts. This can be determined through trial and error, and then it probably won't be right for everyone. When trying to balance rewards, it's hard to be perfect. You often have to settle for good enough. So again, he has several different, here you can see each one of these, and I can go through them really fast. So different ways of giving rewards again. So you have praise. The simplest one is just say, hey, good job, dude. Next one is points. So earning points can be a thing. And it usually can be a gateway to another reward. So it could be a measure. So again, high score list. You still need to make it meaningful. So if you just have meaningless points, it's not going to be much of a reward. Prolonged play. Oh, you earned one more life. You got extra credit. You can play now for longer. What else would it be? Run out of the energy, and in free-to-play games, and you play pause until you play for more until certain hours pass. So, but that's kind of old school. Like actually, even this kind of like buying yourself through things is not as much a thing in free-to-play, at least in good ones. A gateway. While we desire to play judged favorably, we also have a desire to explore. So unlocking things, getting a key to a locked door. That is very rewarding. Like you find a secret entrance, so to get to see something because you explored more. Hidden doors, things like that. Spectacle, like intermissions, like cutscenes and stuff like that, where they tell a story, can be very rewarding, especially when what's gonna happen next. Expression. So again, way to express yourself, like unlocking clothes and things. But again, remember what type of game you're making. If you're making The Sims, that's good, or something like that. Or with a high multiplayer thing, like a lot of multiplayer, then it's good. But if you're making a mobile game, single player, platformer, it doesn't make a lot of sense without having additional things that connect to that visual. So if you unlock a visual, you should probably also gain something else from it. That can then vary per game or whatever you want. But powers, becoming more powerful. You get, getting the mushroom in Mario, you get more powerful, or, special weapon in Call of Duty or whatever. Resources, again. So earning more resources by winning. So that's a very casino thing. But, again, you could use virtual money. You can use anything. You could build tied to if you have an economy in the game. Status, again, achievements, high leaderboards, rankings. It's very actually good. If you have like a competitive game, you definitely should have this where, again, league, are you Diamond League, Gold League, or Bronze League? And then that's very rewarding when you jump up, and it actually can help you match players together where it's easier to match players because kind of generally what kind of skill and how long they played for. Completion, again, completing certain things like reaching the end of the game, of course, can be rewarding, but also just achievements and things like that. Just reaching a certain point. So again, try to also vary these. So if you give too much similar rewards, it's like 5 points again, 5 points again, it becomes kind of meaningless. So vary, give different types of rewards as you go. Try to maybe have like a couple of different ways to do it, like 2 to 3, and then kind of alternate between them, not just having one. And then we have the next one, which is the lens of punishment. So we have the lens of rewards, so then you have the negative of it, the lens of punishment. Punishment must be used delicately, since after all, players are in a game of their own free will. Balanced appropriately, it will give everything in your game more meaning. And players will have a real sense of pride when they succeed at your game. So especially in the previous reward thing where you have the accomplishments or like the completion, right? So the completion feels so much better when it was a bit more difficult. To examine the punishment in your game, ask yourself these questions. What are punishments in my game? What are the punishments in my game? Sorry. Why am I punishing the players? What do I hope to achieve by it? Do my punishments seem fair to the players? Why or why not? Is there a way to turn these punishments into rewards and get the same or a better effect? Are my strong punishments balanced against commensurately strong rewards? So, that was a hard one. Commensurately. You have to Google that one, I think. So, how to say this? You want to be careful you don't punish players too much. A lot of the time, it depends. Again, if you're catering to Dark Souls players, you probably can have more punishment in other games. But if you're not making something that's strictly hardcore and you don't want, like, you only want a certain, like, very, very, like, certain type of audience, like, very, very small audience. Like, it still can be big if you catch enough of them, but, you know, you need to be careful. I really like this. Is there a way to turn a punishment into a reward? So if you get the feedback from your players, which should be your target audience, that this is unfair, and then instead of you answering, well, it's supposed to be hard, well, then you're wrong, because, again, if that's the player that you think should play your game, then, you know, and he's saying it's unfair, he's probably more in the right. So then thinking about, is there a way I could turn the punishment into a reward? So kind of flipping it over. I think he had a good example here. So for example, let's see here. So there's also like ways that people then start working around these. The customer's always right. Well, they kind of are. It depends again. If you're making the game just for yourself, go ahead. It's your game. You know? But don't complain when nobody plays it. Just saying. But if you really care about creating an experience for other people, for other players, which games usually are about, of course, through that also making money because it's a business, you do need to cater towards a certain audience. You need to cater to certain people, meaning that if they feel it's unfair, it probably is. Because a lot of the time when you're a dev, you get kind of blinded. Again, you put your dev blinders on and you get defensive. You're like, no, this is how I designed it. And you're like, well, you might have designed it that way and you might have spent a lot of hours into designing this. I'm not questioning that and really much thought and complexity. But if it doesn't create the experience the player expects, and if the target audience doesn't like it, you're probably just spend a lot of time on something that people don't want. And that's just because you spend a lot of time into something doesn't mean that it's not inherently good, right? So looking at that, I remember there being a good example, for example, of like turning around. Again, more punishing, it increases the challenge. Also, it sometimes can create endogenous value, so value within something. So it is still important to punish, you just have to be very careful what to do. Oh, here it is. Okay, I found a place where he has a really good example. One thing that psychological study has shown is that reward is always better tool for reinforcement than punishment. Whenever possible, if you need to encourage a player to do something, it is better to use reward than punishment, if you can. One great example from Blizzard's game Diablo is the business of gathering food in games. Many game designers at one time or another get the idea that they would like to make a game with a realistic system of food gathering. That is, if you do not gather food, your character suffers from diminished powers because of hunger. Blizzard implemented this and found that players considered it nuisance. They must perform a fairly boring activity or suffer a penalty. So Blizzard turned it around and implemented a system where your player never gets hungry, but if you do eat food, they get a temporary boost in abilities. Players like this much better. By changing a punishment into a reward, they were able to turn the same activity from negative to positive. Your reward is not to be a punishment. But there is. I mean, there is, of course, exceptions again, but exception doesn't prove the rule, right? So again, just because one game doesn't do it, just because one game does it a certain way and does it successfully, doesn't mean that it will work in your game, except if you also copy over the meaningfulness. So I think that is very important. A lot of time I see people copying over like a reward system or a punishment, like, oh, you just die. But then they don't, like, usually that game has a meaning behind it. Like, the game is about rebirth, and the meaning is that you get reborn, and these mechanics then that are tied to it, that, you know, you actually get reborn as stronger or whatever. And I'm just pulling this out of my whatever. Like, this is something I'm inventing right now. This is not based on anything. So if you don't copy then over those, then it's going to be meaningless. And a lot of time I see then people not copy over those because it's like, well, I don't want it to be like that game. And you're like, well, that's what makes it work in their game. I like the well-rested rewards. Yeah, well-rested. So that's a way to flipping it over. When it comes to complaints like unfair, what percent of people need to say something unfair to probably wait the request? I think new noise works. That's a good question. Really good question. I think it's very hard to say. Is there like a very strict percentage? I would say that you need to use intuition. And I think in addition to intuition, like saying like, okay, you know, a lot of people are starting to say this, let's even test it. So I think a willingness to kind of try it out, to change it, is very important. A lot of cases, I see devs get very defensive again, and they're like, no, like where you've seen this, you know, where 80% of the player base or even 90% are like shouting out like, we want this, and the devs are like, no, this is not how we designed it. And not until like the world ends, you know, where, you know, they're losing players because of it, do they start like, oh, scrambling, like, oh my god, what's wrong? Well, I don't know. So again, it's not necessarily about the percentage. It's about always keep listening. Always be open-minded. Just because someone has a different opinion doesn't mean that they're right. That doesn't mean that they're wrong. So always be also open to test things. So if you are able, can afford to create a small prototype or a small version where you test out something and see if it actually, the player is right, then you should do it. Now, how many percent of player base should say? It's very hard. I mean, I think it's more, instead of saying 10%, very analytical, very statistical, I think it's more about be open-minded when you listen to players' feedback. Listen, if you have a community manager at your studio, listen to them. They're not just trying to be, you know, annoying and, you know, they really try to usually, if you have good community managers, they will try to bring up issues that the players have. And again, remember, these guys are your customers. Doesn't mean they're always right. It just means that you should always listen to them, even if they are wrong. And sometimes taking the patience to explain something. Like, I know that sometimes in a game you have to do a choice X, and it has you have a choice X, and it has a repercussion Y. And then people hate the Y, the repercussion of the choice X. But if you would change the X, so change the choice, then there would be a bigger repercussion. So sometimes explaining that, or maybe it's something to do with money or something that's outside of the game that the player just doesn't know. Like, oh, we would love to make this multiplayer, but we can't afford it, you know? So sometimes being transparent can also help then when you can actually listen because of outside things. But always when you can, you should always listen. You should always try it out. I found a lot of interesting things just because someone said something and I was kind of listening instead of just trying to, like, when I'm testing, I'm not there to tell my opinion to the person. I'm there to listen to their opinion. So a lot of the time I'm kind of like, oh, that sounds, something like there was either irritating or interesting. It can be both or either or. Well, and then I'll mark it down like, oh, that's interesting. He thought this. I didn't really mean that. And I'll underline. I won't tell the player about this because I want him to continue those paths and not feel like I'm trying to judge him or anything. And then when I go back, I will give it a try. I will change the game. I will play around. Hilda Definitely just did some testing on my first game. It's really the type of game I'd play, mobile puzzle. and I have opposing feedback. Hard to choose which opinions to lead change into next iteration. Maybe I can A/B test and do both if there's time. Trying to make everyone happy is tough. Yeah, and remember, you don't need. I think there is very important. You said not making everybody happy. Don't try to make everybody happy. Try to decide what is your game about. Again, if you're making a mobile puzzle game again, so we had just a couple of lenses ago. Again, the lens of head versus hands, and hands. So is your game a physical? So is it like an action-based game where you have to learn dexterity and timing? Or is it mental? Now, if the players who give the feedback are more trying to push it into more physical, they're probably in the wrong, you're testing with your wrong target audience. Like you're saying, like, I want people who love to solve puzzles. And usually, if you love to solve puzzles, you probably also have very little chance. So, in the lens of skill versus chance, it's probably more mental skill. So, defining these so you know who you want to play with. So, you can actually do a short questionnaire if you test with, like, what type of games do you like to play? What do you enjoy in games? If they're like, oh, I love shooting and doing headshots and 360 no scopes, you're like, well, you're clearly playing on a PC, which is not mobile. That's what you're really in love with. And also, you're very action-based. You're like jumping around, that's the adjective. Whereas if someone says like, oh, I just love when, I try to solve a puzzle, I struggle, and then I figure something out and it just clicks. And maybe, or says something like, oh, I love to play point-and-click puzzle game. I don't know, whatever. So think about that too. Like, take that in account. Don't try to make something that pleases everybody. But A/B testing is really good, definitely. I think, again, reiterating, it's about listening, but also looking at who said that, are they in the target audience, and does it reflect what I want to make? It still is. I mean, even if I said, oh, devs get defensive, of course you have a right. It's your creation, right? And you should still stay true to that experience, but you might have to change how you're trying to make that experience then. About art? No, this has nothing to do. This is the art of game design. So again, game design is the job of defining the rules, the goals, the experience. It's the craft of creating a fair, balanced game, like balancing. All this is game design. The art of means that it's not art. We're not drawing anything. It is how to. The art meaning that it's not a mathematical thing. So deciding things usually in games, like should I have 5 or 10 weapons, has nothing to do with math. It's an art form. Yeah. So, this book is very, and the reason it's called art, it's very theoretical, but it's also very kind of pushing you to create an experience, thinking your game as an experience versus thinking it as a mathematical formula or something in the likes. So, we're right now discussing balance, how to balance your game. And we've gone through a lot of lenses already. So the lens is the book uses lenses, which are kind of like ways to look at your game. So you're looking through different lenses to look at it from different point of views. So we just went through the lens of punishment. So looking through the lens of punishment, looking at how am I punishing players? Is it too punishing? Is it meaningful? Does it achieve the thing I wanted to achieve? And etc., etc. And then it goes to lens 48. So next lens is the lens of simplicity versus complexity. Striking the right balance between simplicity and complexity is difficult and must be done for right reasons. Use this lens to help your game become one in which meaningful complexity arises out of simple systems. Ask yourself these questions. What elements of innate complexity do I have in my game? So innate complexity would be something like Go. So it's a very simple rule set, but because your choices within the rule set are so plentiful, so you can, or chess even, you can move so many things, but a rule is very simple. It is innately complex. Is there a way that innate complexity could be turned into emergent complexity? Sorry, I got it the wrong way around, but anyway. So emergent complexity is Go. So again, emergent from simple rules, and innate is just you have a lot of things going on, a lot of exceptions. Like it's complex because it is you have a lot of different parts in it. Do elements of complexity arise from my game? If not, why not? Are there elements of my game that are too simple? So it even discusses, even with the same words, whereas I always like to say, is like, especially if you make board games, try to make as little exception cases. So if you would write down your, even if you're a digital game, what if you would try to write down your rules for your game? Like, you know, if I had a platformer, it would be like, try to run right. When an enemy comes, you can jump. If you land on an enemy, then it kills. And then, let's say, oh, except if it's Bowser, you can't land on him. So if you have a lot of these except blah, 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 then you have innate complexity, meaning that you're just making a complex by kind of nature. Like, you know, like the keyboard is kind of has a lot of buttons, whereas you can do the same interaction a lot of time with these too, almost as a complex games with more simple things. It's kind of hard to explain. Whereas emergent is the reverse, or not necessarily reverse. It's complexity from kind of amount of choices or emerging from the rules. So looking at Othello, all these classic board games is a very good way to look at something that is emergent complex. So the rules are simple. You're in, in Go again. Have you guys played Go? It's a bad example if you haven't played it. What would be another one? So in Go, it's just, basically it's a very simple rule, but it's still very complex and strategical. So it emerges the complexity when you start playing, and then the skill of the level player can even make the complexity higher. So how many, turns ahead or things you think about. So when you look at simplicity, and that's the thing, it's kind of sometimes something like when something is very simple and beautiful, that's when it's kind of emergent complex, right? Like Sudoku, or what is that, threes, is it called? Where you just have those sliding, and then if you get two next to each other, they merge and become twice the value. The game of life is simple. The game is complex. Exactly. Yeah, it's a very interesting read. I highly recommend this book. And if you don't want to read, you can follow along. Okie dokie. Welcome to the company Game Devs, and cheers for the follow, dude. Also, sup, Geek and Gale. Well, so again, think about, are you making, and then that's the thing, like, are you making things complex just to be complex? And then if you're making complex, if you want it to be complex, are you making it emergent complex or innately complex? So innately meaning, again, are you making it complex just by having a complicated rule set, or are you making it complex because it has a nice, like, again, like, it has emergent complexity, meaning that through the choices or the amount of choices or the things you can do are so plentiful. Actually, a lot of game designers say that when they put something in the game, they want to have several purposes, which is even in the next lens, if I remember correct. So again, you can make something that's very emergent complex if you can use it in many ways. Hello. Okay, next lens. This is very fast. Sorry, guys. I feel like, are you understanding anything and how this relates to balancing? I hope it's good. I hope this is entertaining. I hope this is information that you guys like. I hope I explain it well enough for you guys to understand. Some things are a bit hard. I wish Tasty was here for this. Like the lens of simplicity and complexity uses complex words, but it's not a complex thing necessarily. It's innately complex, not emergently complex. I'm making it complex by my bad explanation. Anyway, the lens of elegance again. So the most classic games are considered to be masterpieces of elegance. Use this lens to make your game as elegant as possible. Ask yourself these questions. What are the elements of my game? What are the purposes of each element? Count these Count these up to give the element an elegance rating. For elements with only one or two purposes, can some of these be combined into each other or removed altogether? For elements with several purposes, it's possible for them to take on even more. So again, the elegance thing, it's again, and I think it also attaches to the whole emergent complexity. So, by doing one thing, you actually do a lot of things, and it has a lot of meaning, and it has a lot of, things it affects. But at the same time, it's a very simple thing, which makes it elegant. What could be another example of that? Like, for example, he used the example of Pac-Man. So they give players a short-term goal, eat the dots close to me. So the dots also give a long-term goal, clear all the dots from the board. So dots have two different, so when the dots kind of show your progression, but they also kind of show you where you should go. Because the closest dot probably is where you want to go, depending on where the enemy is. They slow down the player slightly when eating them. So the dots slow down the player when you're eating them, creating good triangularity. So again, low risk, which would mean go where there's not too many dots, whereas high risk where there's a lot where you slow down and maybe the ghosts catch up. They give the player points, which measures success. So that's another thing that just in that one element of a dot. And then they give player points which can earn an extra life. And then of course, by getting all of them, you finish the game. So in just one element, there's 5 different things how it connects to the game. So when you look at your game, look at each element of your game. So basically, element is something you can interact with, usually, in some way, or the system can interact with. And think about, like, even you could think your score as an element. You can't interact directly, but the system can interact with it. What kind of purposes does it have? Does it combine different purposes, or does it just high score, you just get score and you get high score, or is it like, you get high score, but also for every 100 score you get a life? The score also, if you get a high enough score, you get an achievement. Like, how much does it connect to everything? Sup, Sound of Gaming? Welcome back. I miss you too, dude. How are you? We just went through the lens of elegance. It's one of my favorite things. It's kind of one of my core thinking a lot of the time when I do things. Is like, if I make a thing in a game, like if I decide to add a mechanic, can I make it have several purposes? So if I put a gun like that can shoot rapid fire, is there ways that you could use the rapid fire except just shooting enemies? Or, can I use it to destroy environment? By destroying environment, what does that mean? By destroying, again, so everything should connect, and think about connection. And then if you notice something that's like, it doesn't really bring that much value to the game, it just has one element, doesn't really have, only has one purpose, you might as well possibly remove it, because it might be just unnecessary, and it makes your game kind of cluttered. Again, making it innately complex, meaning, again, you're just making the game more complex for complexity's sake. You're good? I'm good too. We have a lot of lenses today, why I'm speed reading today, and even Tasty is not here, which is sad, because there's a lot of good things where we could have discussed balance. For example, World of Warcraft. There was some interesting thoughts I had, which I would like to discuss with Tasty. Maybe I'll do that next Saturday, when the next episode is gonna air. It's a pity he can't be here with us. So, going forward, the lens of character. So, elegance and character are opposites. They're like miniature versions of simplicity and complexity, and must keep kept in balance. To make sure your game has lovable defining quirks, ask yourself these questions. Is there anything strange in my game that player talks about excitedly? Does my game have fun qualities that make it unique? Does my game have flaws that the player likes? So again, if you would make something very, very polished, you might create Sudoku. But maybe that's, like, if you just make Sudoku, it might be very, like in a digital game, it might be an okay experience, not getting wrong, it's an awesome game. But is there any quirks or things you can adjust? Like threes, have you guys played threes or 20? Actually, for example, so in threes, it's a mobile game where you, again, it's kind of like Sudoku, but you're sliding things. And if you get two, if I remember right, if you get two of the same value next to it, they can merge and then they double. So they sum up to double. But what they also did was that those small tiles are small characters that have like, they're like happy, which gives it character again. But it also can become more confusing if you think it from a simplicity and elegance way. You're like, do I need this? It's less elegant because now I have a lot of characters on my board or something. Yeah, 2048 is also, I thought about that, but that's actually a copy of Threes. And it's only PC, and it doesn't have the characters, which was kind of the quirky thing. So actually that's maybe the thing. Like the copy is kind of the elegant or simplistic version of Threes, which has like all these characters, and when you get to certain points, it introduces the new value, like, hi, I'm Bob, woo, which again makes it something unique and interesting and kind of weird in a good way. So think about that, like, even if you should strive for elegance, in my opinion, and a good way of complexity, depending on your target audience. So all these depend on your target audience again. So there's no like try to get all of these. If you make something that's super simple, people who like complexity is going to be turned off. If you make something that needs to be very, very clear and defined, if you add a lot of character, it might be wrong. It might be a bit like, I don't understand anything. I'm going to go play the thing. We're still competing for time, right? You can only play so many games every day for so many hours. When you're young, you can play more, and when you're older, you can play less. There's always competition for people's times. And, and when people get older, you compete against family and job and stuff like that. So making sure that people don't, have a good time when playing your game is very important. It sounds kind of generic, but that's why you need to choose. You can't get everybody necessarily to like your game. Like, even if, for example, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is very, very popular now, meaning it is achieving a huge fun factor for a very big audience, there's still a big audience that doesn't like it. And they can't make everybody happy. There's people who just don't like shooting people. There's no way, even if you remove that, then the other part that are now playing it would probably, go away. And that's why, for example, Fortnite actually makes it more casual. So the people who don't like that hardcore kind of military shooting might like Fortnite because it's more cartoony and, building and creative in that way. But still the same type of game. And the next lens, we have lens 51. Oh my god. This feels like a marathon. Woo, woo, woo. We still have so many pages left. We have still this many lenses left. So what is that? 6 lenses? And we've covered like this many lenses. That's a lot, guys. That's a lot. I highly recommend getting this book. You will definitely get more insight and more depth if you read it, especially in this chapter. So the next lens is lens number 51, the lens of imagination. All games have some element of imagination and some element of connection to reality. Use this lens to help find balance between detail and imagination. Ask yourself these questions. What must the player understand to play my game? Can some element of imagination help them understand that better? What high-quality realistic detail can we provide in this game? What details would be low quality if we provide them? Can imagination fill the gap instead? Can I give details that imagination will be able to reuse again and again? What details I provide inspire imagination? What details I provide stifle imagination? So this is a difficult thing to explain. So for example, like sometimes you can use imagination to make things, for example, easy to make for you as a developer. For example, instead of showing a high detailed face of the character all the time, maybe you introduce the detail of the face in a intro video where you see like, ooh, or a really detailed drawing of him. And then in the game, he's small, abstract, but because you saw that face once, you're gonna supplement that little character that is more abstract in the game with that face. So you're helping the people imagine. That said, if you want the player then to kind of be able to imagine that let's say the player is just a cube, and the cube is kind of you, but it's an emotional cube. It tries to represent your emotional state. maybe drawing a very realistic face before that might ruin the whole thing, because you're suddenly it's like, oh, it's Bjorn. It's not me, it's Bjorn. Again, like for example, in like let's say you play an RPG, if you play like Skyrim, you can choose and you can design who you are, and that's, builds your imagination. I'm a miner. I'm gonna go out in the world and have fun. And then you play The Witcher, which is more real. It has much more strict story, and you can only play one character. Hey, can I ask something about the C# script? You can. I don't know if I can answer it before we go into the next section of the stream, but please post. There's definitely probably people in the chat who also know the answer, so go ahead. And also, if nobody answers here, check out our Discord. There's a lot of people who know C# there. So there's a channel for help for programming/coding. So that's the whole imagination. Well, it's not the whole, Again, for example, if you build it based on a familiar world, is another example he uses. Like, if it's something that players in very, very familiar with, you can probably don't need as much detail. You don't have to explain things. Like when I played World of Warcraft, as an example, there's a lot of players who knew the story. They played Warcraft, they played all of the whole series, and they knew the backstories and all of the things. And then they didn't put that much detail. They were just introduced as characters, and people would know, like, oh, that's a general. He's the bad guy. So that is kind of the whole idea of, like, for me, it didn't matter really for that game, but for some people, the World of Warcraft much more detail rich, where it wasn't for me, but that's something like if you know your target audience. But then again, not that many of us have like pre-built, intellectual property that we can use, like Pokemon or something like that. Like I think a good way to say that, for example, the Pokemon AR game in the mobile that got very popular, Pokemon Go. It was basically because of this effect that it was built on a pre-existing IP. They had the same game with the same mechanics before that several years, but it wasn't as popular. So, what else do we have here? So there's a lot of things you can play around with imagination. Like, for example, for me, playing sometimes like the older games which use pixel graphics, it was easier to identify with because they didn't provide so much detail, so I could supplement with my own imagination. So remember, that is the thing. Like, not everything needs to be realistic. Sometimes it does need to be. But sometimes you also want something to be untold so you can imagine. Like, for example, I'm going to use my personal game, which you haven't played yet because it's not out yet. But it's, again, a witch game in a tower you're trying to escape. So it's a platformer. The story kind of goes, which I'm not explicit. I'm not telling it with great detail, which is that, you're actually the princess. There's nothing saying that she's the princess. That's up to you guys. If she's a princess, she's a princess. If she's not, there's nothing saying that. She is a witch, though, but that is very clear. But she's a princess stuck in a tower, and the people are trying to rescue her. So there's a lot of like heroes, like great heroes in shining armor trying to rescue her, and they all died and they fail, and she's just tired of waiting, and that's why she's breaking out herself. She taught herself witchcraft, and now she's escaping. So again, that's the original story, right? Now, when you play it, I'm not going to shove this in your face. I'm going to have dead warriors in the dungeons and stuff like that. And you might be like, oh, these are slaves that the witch had or something. You can build up your own story. But I'm still trying to hint at a certain story, which I'm kind of trying to make you wake up your imagination and think about it. And kind of in that way create more depth. Because again, I have now access to your imagination, which is much more powerful and much more in deep than if I went and told this story in like a text that goes, long time ago, the princess, blah, blah, blah. Like, well, now actually might be a good way too. But it's a different thing. Like, that has more detail. Then I also have to support that detail throughout the game. And I'm not a great story writer. So I'd rather use your imaginations so you guys write the story for me. Independent female character. Yeah, exactly. A question. I have a if the number is less than chance, balance plus equals 1. How can I make it that it happens once? Because like that it will have adding 2. Oh, you mean like it would only add once? You would just put plus minus equal 1. Or balance plus plus is another short word for that. C#. So plus equals 1 would only add 1. Then it only increases once, but it will happen several times if you run the script several times, as long as the number is less than the chance. And then plus, so the plus equal there, or balance plus plus would also just increase it 1. So that depends on what you want to try to do, but maybe ask in the Discord, it's easier, they can go more in detail. I don't want to interrupt the whole flow because I can get derailed. All right, that's the lens of imagination. I think this is very, very important. And it's a really great tool. It's a tool, like I see imagination as a tool inside of the player that I can utilize. I can choose to utilize. I do have to excite it. So for example, just because I put a painting and I put a Dracula in it, you know, people are not going to be like asking, why is there a painting of a Dracula in a witch tower? They're just going to be like, oh, boring. But if I kind of somehow create a connection between Dracula and something else, like maybe the dragon has the same face, but a bit bigger scale, maybe they're like, huh. And then I'm suddenly, creating a connection with something, and that's when imagination. So you have to be proactive about that. Sometimes it just emerges from nothing. And a lot of the time when you use this, it's like shooting with a shotgun, the imagination can lead anywhere and people build their own premises, and that's fine. Yeah, use a flag. But you might have to explain that to Antoine. I don't know. So we're going through the book, The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. The next, in the name of balance, is The Lens of Economy. And this is kind of putting a big word and big thing into just one lens. So giving a game an economy can give it surprising depth and a life all of its own. But like all living things, it can be difficult to control. Use this lens to keep your economy in balance. How can my players earn money? Should there be other ways? What can my players buy? Why? Is money too easy to get? Too hard? How can I change this? Are the choices about earning and spending meaningful ones? Is a universal currency a good idea in the game? Or should there be specialized currencies? So like in mobile games, you have the premium and the non-premium currencies and stuff like that, which is maybe not the best way to explain it. Again, covering the whole how to balance economies is probably a book this thick on its own, and it's a lot about intuition and testing in the end. So I don't even know if you can write a book. It is definitely this thick book, but also, can you write that book? You probably would have to be people don't understand the real world economy yet to a perfection where they can predict it. So in-game economies can actually help understand real-world economy, but it's still very, very hard. So that's why he even tries to simplify it, thinking about how can you get money, where can you spend money, what does this mean, basically. Is it meaningful? Again, sometimes and a lot of times I see unnecessary in-game economies, like a game that it's kind of tacked on. It's kind of, again, like the Diablo hunger system. Like the player is just in love, the developer is just in love of the idea of making something. Oh, I'm gonna make this realistic economy, and you think about all the programming challenges, and then they buy things here and spend it here, and it's gonna model the real world, and I'm gonna have a stock index and blah blah blah. And in the end, the game is nothing about that. It's just something that's kind of a layer on top, and something they're really interested in making. But And that's why you should also think, like, maybe if you want to make that game, you need to change target audience if it's not a core mechanic. There's games where there is a core mechanic, definitely. So again, it needs to be meaningful also to the everything in the game, the economy. So World of Warcraft, for example, had a big economy, but it was definitely meaningful because it was a way to not have to grind 600 years to get items, for example, maybe. Then again, you would have to grind gold then, so it's still kind of, everything was connected, interconnected, and that's why it's so hard. So thinking about how do you get money, how can you spend money, and actually the whole then when you go to multiplayer, it becomes a whole multiple, like how does money flow within players and what do they, can they exchange items and can you abuse the system? So it easily becomes a thing you can abuse in a lot of games because it is definitely very difficult to maintain. I don't think, again, I think the only way, and he even says it here, is to test, iterate. And something I don't think he mentions here is analytics. Look at analytics, look at that. That's how even they track like real world money laundering. They use analytics. So look at the analytics, see where money's going. Are there any players hoarding a lot of money? Are there a lot of players that suddenly have no money for some reason and never get any money? Look at how money flows throughout the system. Look at the average, if you have some kind of auction, what are the prices, what are the fluctuations there, what is it compared to the store prices and stuff like that. Sup, Pandaleaf, welcome back. No tasty today, I'm sorry. So next, and the last one in the chapter of balance, Pandaleaf, you just missed the whole chapter about game mechanics must be in balance. So the chapter about how to balance game mechanics and other things in your game. So the last thing is the lens of balance, which is kind of silly. There are many types of game balance, and each is important. However, it is easy to get lost in the details and forget the big picture. Use the simple lens to get out of the mire and ask yourself the only important question. Does my game feel right? Why? Why not? So again, and the game feel right. It's so much intuition goes into designing a game. So there's nothing going around that. And I think one part which he discusses in the beginning of the book, which goes into this balance, so having the right intuition when balancing, goes also towards being able to listen to your players, able to listen to yourself, but also acquiring experience and knowledge outside of just games. So for example, if you want to balance something, knowing something about a totally different subject might help you balance the thing, depending on what type of game it is. Like, for example, at Supercell, which is a mobile dev company, one of the lead designers there for, I think it's Battle Royale, used to be an accountant, and his degree is in accountancy. So again, that definitely helps when you start looking at numbers and figuring out value and how it flows, especially in an economy. So again, that's experience that not necessarily relate directly to a game, but can be highly usable in a game. Other things like even going hitchhiking might be very good, like especially if you're very like experience-based game, like making Journey, making those interactions about helping each other as players. It probably comes from some designer that has a lot of trekking experience, maybe. It could help you just by walking out in the forest with other people. First ever Microsoft Audio documentation was written by a biologist. Oh, nice. Didn't know that. So again, I feel like there's no knowledge you can't utilize in game dev. That's the unique thing. In game development, there's definitely knowledge that you won't always need. Like, I know how to make food, for example. I'm a bit of a foodie. I like to make a lot of food. That's not going to help me a lot. The things that's probably going to help me is like I'm used to reading and writing recipes. So that's definitely something that can come into game dev. If there is a game about any kind of food related subject, I probably can be helpful knowing about food. Sometimes it can lead to be an inspiration, like let's say Fruit Ninja. Maybe the guy was cutting vegetables and he didn't know how to, so he was learning. So he was just chopping with his knife, and I was like, what if this was a game? Like, what if you did a touch control and your knife was kind of the, you know, your finger was the knife, right? Cooking stream with Björn, please. Please. Yes, we should do some. I've been talking about this a long time to do a cooking stream. I really want to do that. I just need to make enough, like, people would know that it's gonna happen, and there's a lot of pre-preparation, because streaming that is totally different. But I actually have now maybe a setup which I could stream, because again, I can't cook anything here except if I bring. So again, I need to. it becomes a bit more complex, but definitely something I would love to do and I have thought about doing. But that's the thing. Like, again, you don't know where inspiration is gonna hit. The thing is, if you just play games, the danger is that the only thing you know, your only life experience is gonna be in games. The only thing you can pull is from other games. And again, that is very useful, not saying. But most likely your game will be very generic, because your experience is limited into this box which has already been created within the game world. So adding things to the box is hard. So if you want to invent a new genre, if you want to be novel, if you want to have, innovative games, just thinking within this box, which is everything you played thus far, is not going to get you very far. And the reason is because that's where everybody else pulls from, and it's already been created when it's within the box. Instantly I make a game, instantly make the game, like Fruit Ninja. Now it's in the box. Now it's in the spectrum. It's not novel anymore. So if you want to pull stuff from outside, you need to have experience that are outside of games. And that's why a lot of the time, the most excellent game designers are just people with very rich backgrounds. Not necessarily the people who play the most games. They are usually just the people who spend the most money and they're the best customers for games. Game Design Cook Show with Björn. Cooking. You should. I like. Have you guys seen Robbaz? Do you know who that is? He streams also on Twitch under Robbaz. He's a Swedish guy. He's super funny. But he also has Cooking with the Cock, because cock in Swedish means cook. So it's cooking with the cook. But he likes to say the Swedish word because it is funny. It's funny in English. So the next chapter is very short, luckily. So we only have four lenses in this one. It's very thin. Look at this, the thinnest of the thin. The next chapter, which we will go through still today, is chapter 14, Game Mechanics Support Puzzles. So he discusses in this chapter puzzles and how to design good puzzles. And it's actually very, very interesting. It doesn't really teach you how to make a puzzle, but it teaches you how to evaluate puzzle. Is your puzzles good or not? So if you make a puzzle-based game, definitely, worth it. I'd be watching. I'm kitchen addict myself. Bought all-clad saute pan and wood stove knife to improve my skills. Nice. I actually use Asian knives. I have 3 different Asian knives. They're all handmade. Several, those folded knives cost $200 a piece. I'm crazy. They're super sharp. The hard thing about that is if you even rest the knife on your skin any point, not even pushing or anything, it'll cut you. So it's oops, my finger got cut. Wood stuff is nice. I like the balance of the Asian knives more because I use a pinch grip. You're a really good place to look for innovation recently. A really, really good place to look for innovation are recent research papers. Yeah, research anything. You can go academic route. You can go read recent research. You probably find interesting techniques and technology, and you might create novelty from point of view of technology. Or on the other hand, you might go to, South Korea and you see a K-pop band and you get invited to backstage and you have a weird experience and suddenly you're making K-pop Manager 2018. Are you the next weeboo? And that might be an experience that you have insight in because of that. And then that becomes the novelty is an experience, which the tech has nothing to do. So anything, you working as a cleaner for 2 years, you working at Starbucks, maybe you make the a game about something that a lot of people can emphasize with, like something like they already did in the VR, the whole job. What is it called? Job simulator. The monotonous thing of being a cashier or car mechanic. Are you telling us about your personal experiences, Pierre? No, not at all. Search for pans with Google. Yeah, K-pop. Yes, K-pop is my no. I've never been to Korea yet. Not yet. Not north nor south. Not yet. Maybe in the future. I'll go to Japan next year though. That is on the list of places to go. So back to puzzles. The lens of accessibility is the first one in the chapter about puzzles, and it says when you present a puzzle to players or a game of any kind, they should be able to clearly visualize what their first steps would be. Ask yourself these questions. How will players know how to begin solving my puzzle or playing my game? Do I need to explain it, or is it self-evident? Does my puzzle or game act like something they have seen before? If it does, how can I draw attention to that similarity? If it does not, how can I make them understand how it does behave? Does my puzzle or game draw people in and make them want to touch it and manipulate it? If not, how can I change it so that it does? So again, that almost goes towards the whole toy, so the lens of the toy. Thinking of your game as a toy, so the main mechanic probably should have some kind of toy-like toy-like aspect to it. Like if you have a fidget spinner, it's just fun to spin it around. It's just fun to interact with. So if you can create just fun interaction, it's also interesting. And the same thing goes to puzzles. If it's just fun to interact with the puzzle, people might actually accidentally solve it. Like Rubik's Cube, it's just fun to spin things around if you actually play around with one. And then you will never accidentally solve the Rubik's Cube. But you might get very far or get interested in it. So here, for example, he has the principle 1, make the goal easily understood. So he has 2 pictures and I want to show them. So he has this picture and then he has a picture with kind of a key thing with a brick. So this you probably don't know where to start with. You would look at this and be like, I don't know where to pull, push, draw, or do whatever. Whereas this, you would probably instantly take your hand and start moving this brick and rotating it. So this is something that's visually very easily understood, and this is something visually a bit harder to understand. So think about that. How easy? Like for example, we've been playtesting a thing where you were removing sticks, right? And it was just very hard to visually understand what to do. We had to create a very complicated tutorial. So then thinking about how can I make it more visual? How can I make it so that instantly you know how to interact with the object and what is the goal? So the goal is, of course, here is to get the brick out. This I have no clue. Probably get these 2 pieces of different color disconnected. Sup, Tim? How was your stream, dude? Welcome. Guys, if you haven't checked out Tim, he's mighty handsome. He has a huge, handsome beard. And welcome, guys. No, he's an awesome game dev also, so go check him out. Is he gonna say something? If he's gonna say something, click his name and drop him a follow, guys. Habibi. So today, Tim, I'm here alone. But you have the book, right? So maybe you have some additional insight. Like I'm gonna say, hey, he didn't know whether to... Yeah. Exactly. It goes good. We went through the whole, if you have the book, the chapter of balance, right? It's really thick. Look at the amount of, like these are just marking the different lenses and there's a lot of them right there. So I basically today have only had time to go through the lenses. It's been very, very theoretical. I hope though it has been useful. And we started with the chapter of puzzles, which is much more thin and only has 4 lenses. And we went through the lens of accessibility. Yes, I do have the book. I haven't read it that far yet. Oh my God, you need to catch up, dude. No. Maybe you can watch the VODs and read at the same time and get confused. So if you heard of the useless box, that's a good example of a fun interaction. Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. So anything like, sometimes it doesn't need to be a puzzle game for something to be fun to interact with, right? but in the puzzle games especially, it needs to be fun to interact with. It's not going to be as fun if it's not, and that can come from like visuals, it can come from sound, it can from, so thinking your puzzle as a fun thing to interact with. This might not be too fun, right? But something else might be like, I don't know. I don't have a puzzle right here. Maybe intro. Where's my Rubik's Cube? I don't know. Anyway. So again, and then be able to visualize how it's complete. So if you can make it visually instantly understood that I need to take this thing out of there, that's my goal, the better it is. So that was the lens of accessibility, and I kind of also covered the lens of visible progress, but let's go still through it. So lens 55, lens of visible progress in your puzzle. Players need to see that they are making progress when solving a difficult problem. To make sure they are getting this feedback, ask yourself these questions. What does it mean to make progress in my game or puzzle? Is there enough progress in my game? Is there a way I can add more interim steps of progress success? What progress is visible and what progress is hidden? Can I find a way to reveal what is hidden? So again, a very important thing about motivation is to know how far you are. If you take the Rubik's Cube, it kind of has that built in because, the more you have the same color as you match things, the closer you are to solving it. Again, if you're doing this randomly, you're probably never going to do it. But anyway, and that way it's a very hard puzzle to solve. It's very easy to get started with the Rubik's Cube, but it's very hard to solve. So remember to show, like if you can find ways to show that you're halfway there, you complete 1/3 of the way, it kind of works to reward the player. So again, going back to the whole game balance and the lens of reward, thinking about ways to reward the player. So this could be an interim reward. If it's more difficult puzzle, it's gonna more likely that they won't get demotivated and give up. Man, Google has everything. Yep, Google Scholar is a good way. There's a lot of different places you can find good like research papers. Google Scholar is kind of hit and miss. Yeah, I sort of lost the ability to keep up with the reading when I started doing early morning 2 weeks ago. Yeah, there's a lot to read, but then again, just following along is already going to give you a lot of insight into the book. But I definitely recommend reading it. Then again, it is a lot. Like if I didn't do this game design book club, I probably reading, like I read this because I had to for school, but like again, have to read this thick of a book. You have to be highly motivated or very interested. Woohoo! Living on a prayer. Yeah, we're halfway there. Yep, we're halfway now, and I think that at the end. No, this goes all the way. There's not that big thick. There's not a thick index, so we're definitely halfway now. So again, think about how you can visualize the progress if you're solving a puzzle. Is the way that you're halfway through, visually, preferably. It can also be in other ways, but visuals is the easiest way. Then the next lens, lens 56, the lens of parallelism. Parallelism in your puzzle brings parallel benefits to players' experience. To use this lens, ask yourself these questions. Are there bottlenecks in my design where players are unable to proceed if they cannot solve a particular challenge? If so, can I add parallel challenges for player to work on when this challenge stumps them? If the parallel challenges are too similar, the parallelism offers little benefit. Are my parallel challenges different enough from each other to give players the benefit of variety? Can my parallel challenges be connected somehow? Is there a way that making progress on one can make it easier to solve the others? So again, a lot of the time, if you have a very heavily puzzle-based game, sometimes you get stuck, and that's kind of harsh on the player, because if that's the only puzzle you can solve, you might lose the player because he just doesn't know what to do. So thinking about, especially point-and-click games, and back in the day did this, is that you always have something like. There's different levels of difficulty of puzzles, and sometimes the less difficult kind of hint at or build towards understanding the more difficult puzzles. So thinking about like not just having the player trying to attack one puzzle, but have the ability to attach several puzzles. And a very good point here is that if they're all the same, it kind of makes the whole parallelism moot, because it's kind of, again, you're just struggling on 3 puzzles because they're exactly the same. So thinking about different ways. So for example, what would be good ways? Like Sudoku, you kind of can move, or like crossword puzzles. Crossword puzzles are kind of parallel puzzles. If you can't answer them in the order, you can skip the order, answer something else, maybe get a letter that hints at what the other thing would be. So it's a very simple and boring way of explaining it. But there might be other things. Like sometimes something moves. Again, there's like Zelda uses this type of things, and other games too, very, very actively. See if there's any other good examples that I shouldn't skip. Again, another thing that I wouldn't discuss is the sense of solvability. So proving that it's solvable is very important. Again, when you buy a Rubik's Cube, it comes readily solved. So you already have it in solved state. So you have proof it can be solved. And once you mix it up, you know that there is a path to getting it solved. But then, and again, most people will fail if you don't know exactly what to do. Moot point, it's like cow opinions, it doesn't matter. So then we have the lens of the pyramid. Pyramids fascinate us because they have a singular highest point. To give your puzzle the allure of ancient pyramids, ask yourself these questions. You need to make an Egyptian puzzle game. Clearly, the book tells us that. Is there a way all pieces of my puzzle can feed into a singular challenge at the end? Again, thinking about the sub-puzzles being part of a higher thing. Big pyramids are often made of little pyramids. Can I have a hierarchy of ever more challenging puzzle elements, gradually leading to a final challenge? Is there a challenge at the top of the pyramid interesting, compelling, and clear? Does it make people want to work in order to get to it? And I think this is not only puzzles, this is kind of also how to make quests or things like that. Like if you make a story, thinking the story as a pyramid where it leads all to the end, and then all these solving and discovering all these stories around will lead to solving the mystery of the whole main story. So this is kind of a general theme of how to build upon things. And I think it also kind of builds upon, like you can also think it as game mechanics, that you introduce game mechanics, a lot of them in order, of course, and then they all get reused as you move up in the pyramid. But that would be actually a reverse pyramid, right? Having one and then introducing a couple as you move upward. But in puzzles, again, his example, I haven't played it because I haven't played Jumble. But if you know Jumble, that is an example of how, for example, well, again, there's these different words you need to solve, and then there's highlighted the things that are used in the main puzzle, right? Like Skyrim, and a lot of RPGs use this. Again, you go through certain dungeons that are the mini puzzles, and at the end you get this one piece of the bigger main puzzle, right? But that's, again, very simplistic. That's not it. Then again, using this a very puzzle-heavy game might be not the intention, but like, and if puzzles are not your main theme, maybe? I don't know. What do you guys think? Have you seen any like pyramid-like puzzles in just puzzle games? Like if you play something where like Sudoku, all the Sudoku matches don't lead it to a master Sudoku, but that would be interesting. They formed all letters that were part of a bigger Sudoku that you then at the end have to solve too. And then last but not least, to summarize the chapter, which is very short, the lens of the puzzle. Puzzles make the player stop and think. To ensure your puzzles are doing everything you want to shape the player's experience, ask yourself these questions. What are the puzzles in my game? Should I have more puzzles or less? Which of the 10 puzzle principles apply to each of my puzzles? So we didn't go through all the 10 because we don't have time today, but I covered some of them. Do I have any incongruous puzzles? How can I better integrate them into the game? Again, like that meaning like puzzles that just doesn't fit in. In the last few chapters we have focused on game internals. It is now time to consider an external element, the interface of the game. So this was kind of all internals. Now this is the halfway of the book, and now we're gonna move and shift in the topic in the book. So I can go through in a topic level the 10 different puzzle design. So just because they don't reflect the lenses, which is kind of interesting actually. There's a lot of things in this book which we're not going through, which is like there's a lot of lists of tips. And some chapters we have covered them and some we haven't. And there's a lot of principles, and the lenses kind of work outside of those principles. So there are additional principles to look at things. So again, principle number 1 was make it go easily understood. Oh, Wobbly Trout with the host. Thank you for the host, man. How are you, dude? Do you love my face still, dude? Welcome, peeps. If you guys haven't checked out Wobbly Trout, go check him also out. Aww. Or was it or was that I don't know which one. You guys are still welcome. We're just finished the 14th chapter of The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses. Wobbly, wobbly, wobbly. Wobbly, wobbly, we smell a fishy raid. More like, ah! That's how many different ways you can interpret that. Sup, Moiko Plays? We smell a fishy raid! Only 2? Come on! There we go, Moiko. Thank you. I love raids. You guys are welcome. If you haven't checked out Wobbly, here is a link. Click his name and click follow. That's the easiest way. But if that is too difficult, we also have our love command. So we just finished the whole Game Design Book Club. We're going through the 10 principle just on a higher level. Make it easy. So the first one of the 10 principles was make the goal easily understood in your puzzle. Next one, the next principle, make it easy to get started. So get easy, like Sudoku, it's easy to get started, but it goes more difficult as you fill in things. And then you might have to restart even things there. The third one is give a sense of progress. So think about how are you showing visually how far you're in the puzzle. Are you close to solving it? Are there ways you can, make that more clear? Again, that leads to rewarding people not giving up as easily. Give a sense of solvability. So remember to show that it is solvable. Sometimes showing a solved state and then breaking apart the puzzle might be a good way to show that it is solvable. For example, like they do in Rubik's Cube or other, like I think Zelda does that, right? It shows that it can be solved. No, it doesn't. It actually just shows that what you're supposed to do. From beard stream to book stream, exactly. To beardless stream. No, it is not beardless, Dev. So then we have number 5, increase difficulty gradually. So remember, have a good pace, but remember, test with beginner players and more experienced players, not just, and remember, instantly you've tested the game with somebody, they're already moving towards the more experienced players, so always bring new people, especially in puzzle games. If you want to know that your, first minutes in your game is good, you can never retest it with the same person because they already have a mental image of your game. Next, we have parallelism, lets the player rest. So again, if some puzzle is too hard, having several puzzles they can solve, so they can shift and between them is really good. As long as they are different, so you don't get stuck with 3 same puzzles. Again, pyramid structure extends interest. So if you can have sub-puzzles that lead to solving a bigger puzzle, so they give hints at how to solve something like the main puzzle of the game. A lot of adventure games use this type of mechanic. Hints extend interest. This is something we didn't discuss. Again, hints is really good, especially if you want to go for a more casual audience. Having a hint button usually is a good way, and but limiting hints if you're worried could be also, like if you're worried, just press hints. And then again, maybe it's something that's not visible that you can, if your game knows that they're struggling with it, then it highlights the hint or shows the hint. You can also tie it to an economy. And then give the answer is another. So again, sometimes showing the answer, especially in the beginner phase, is really good. So even if it kind of spoils it, but then they might click like, oh, that's how you play it. That's how you, why people watch a lot of Let's Play videos, is because you get that, oh, it's actually rewarding because you suddenly understand and you can utilize that information. So yeah, it is kind of like walkthroughs, but it's also part of kind of an experience. So you can also think about having those in game. They're not necessarily bad or cheating. Perceptual shifts are a double-edged sword. So this is kind of a difficult one to explain. So sometimes kind of making puzzles that are too smart for themselves. Like, in Facebook, if you're in Facebook, these, 2 hamburgers, 1 Coke, plus 1 something is something. And then in the end, they just change a plus to a multiply and then remove one of the Cokes and one of the symbols. So those are kind of like, once you understand what the gimmick in those is, it's kind of boring. At the same time, the whole puzzle is just a gimmick in a way. It's just nothing to do with anything kind of smart. It's just about, in a way, tricking the player. And that can be a double-edged sword, so be careful with those. So you don't want something that you either get or don't. Like, you want it to progress again step by step. Like Sudoku is not really a gimmick, for example, or crossword puzzles, or Rubik's Cube, or these type of games. Thanks for showing me Krita, by the way. I've never seen a free art software that is as good as Krita. It has got me drawing recently. Thanks, dude. We're gonna go and draw something in Krita after I'm finished, which is quite soon. So hang around for that. We're gonna try to finish the whole Halloween-themed Headless Horseman. Dead chat. No, they're not dead. They're listening. This is a lurking stream because I'm talking a lot. There's not a lot of interaction going on here. And that's understandable. I know that a lot of people are working while they're listening, and that's kind of the idea. And usually we have Tasty Graph here, so there's a lot of discussion. Hey, Sianjna Exe, welcome to the Company Gamers, and cheers for the follow. It's okay, Cascada, if you have to leave. It was cool to have you hang around. But anyway, if there's any questions, you can post them also in our Discord. But that was what he covered about how to balance your game mechanics and also how to create puzzles, so things to keep in mind. Again, these are less like this is how you do it, this is different types of puzzles, and this is how you solve them. Making that would make this book several times thicker. This is more about kind of pitfalls, thinking about the experience you're creating, and a lot of time that's what a dev needs. Like, you probably already just chosen, like, I want to make a Rubik's Cube, but make it a 4D game with this type of puzzles. And this book helps with these lenses to look at them and, be careful of common pitfalls. Nabu is listening. Great. Who's headless? A horse or a man? Could it be both? It's only the man, but it would be cool if the horse was also headless. Maybe the man has a head of a horse, and the horse has a head of a pumpkin. That would be interesting, definitely. So, we now covered chapter 13 and 14 in the second edition of The Art of Game Design. Next time we're gonna have this is gonna be a Saturday, guys. So I can't stream on next Sunday, so we moved the whole Game Design Book Club to Saturday, so we still have a stream. So remember, guys, not Sunday, but Saturday next week. And also, if you don't live in Europe, we just had the whole daylight saving time, so for the next week, streams will start 1 hour later, which probably for US is better, and if you're in Asia, it's probably worse because it's going to be even later. So next we're going to go through chapter 15, which is, the topic is players play games through an interface. So talking about designing interfaces, and let's see how long that is. So it seems not too bad. It's about 20 pages. And then we have chapter 16, which is experiences can be judged by their interest curves. And 16 seems very theoretical. But I think we can do 2 chapters. Yeah, we can do 2 chapters. It doesn't have too many lenses. Not like the previous chapter, which had like 100. Like even one page had 3. So thanks for joining, guys. We will now. So next Saturday we will go through chapter 15 and 16. So join us then. We're gonna look at interfaces and what was it? Experience can be judged by the interest curves and things like that, which is kind of interesting that he has interest curves. Is it also then somewhat connected to challenge rate? Probably. I always miss it. No! And even today, Ryu, it was 1 hour later because we had daylight saving times here. So I even gave you 1 hour more to catch up. You need to watch the VODs, Ryu. So I'm gonna take a short break so I can set up for drawing. So we're gonna draw